Hey, we are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. I would say with my partner, Mr. Shawn Francis, but he's actually not here at the moment. He'll be here any moment. I am Brian Altunian, and today's conversation is going to be very fun and high energy. It's already started. It's already started that way for us. So, for parents of neurodivergent children, often finding the proper school, the proper process to educate our kids, it's a challenge. If you don't have resources available to you, you explore a whole bunch of different ways to make sure that your children get a good education and in the hands of people who are caring and loving and want the best for your kids. Today's guests have started their own school in Southern California to do just that for neurodivergent kiddos. And I'm excited for you to meet our guests today, Sara and Natally from Willowcrest School. So stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. All right, welcome back, everybody, for Just One Dad. And our guests today, Shawn will be joining us at some point. So anyways, that's right. We're going to get started anyways, because I'm really excited for you to meet our guests today. Before we do that, I just want to say, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please feel free to put comments in, and it'll show up definitely for our guests, Sara and Natally, and we'll throw some up on the screen. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel at Just Two Dads, please hit the subscribe button and share with your friends, especially if the content that we have today is poignant or something that you would like to know and share with your circle of friends. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for you to explore your own options of things that you're thinking about, how to make a difference in your community. If you're catching us on Google, Google podcast outlets everywhere, including Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, thank you and for making us part of your listening day. And if you're catching us on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, again, thank you for allowing us to share some of the island joy with all of you. Today's guests, as we jump right into this, Sara Kaufman and Natally Raisin of the Willowcrest School, are phenomenal warriors. And we always say on this show that the people who provide service and resources and support to the special needs community are warriors and are heroes, even if they don't see it that way themselves. We firmly believe it. We've had a chance to spend a little bit of time with these two, and I can guarantee you these are warrior women and moms and again, community leaders, and you're going to love their story and their message today. So when Shawn joins us, it'll be great because I'll get a chance to not talk for a little bit, but I'm going to lead the charge here until he pops on here. So without further ado, so Sara Kaufman and Natally Raisin, our executive director, and tell me your titles again.
Clinical director
and executive director of Willowcrest School. So, ladies, welcome. Glad to have you on.
Just here.
Thank you. Just on Just One Dad today.
And we're
so
moms. So there you
just
go.
two moms. Yeah. So I'm outnumbered now. So
Actually, isn't there a show about that?
I think there is a.
It's usually more moms. Just one dad, lots of moms.
Yeah. I think that is probably actually, by the way, it's typical in the special needs community that there's, an occasional dad and a lot of moms. And, one of the things that Shawn and I set out to accomplish when we put this podcast together 3 years ago was just to create, an avenue for dads to be involved in the conversation as well. And with complete respect for the mothers of our children and mothers that we encounter on a daily basis, such as you ladies, we acknowledge that you really are warriors. Dads have, to play a supportive role. Sometimes they'll play the leading role in care for our children, but we acknowledge that you ladies have led the charge. So we just want to create an opportunity. In this particular case, we want to create an opportunity for people to understand that there are great resources out there Some may be aware, some may not be aware. For our children, again, my oldest daughter was diagnosed over 25 years ago, and access to resources was almost impossible to find. These days with the internet, it makes it much easier. So glad to be able to provide a platform for you to share what you all are doing at the Willowcrest School, and hopefully we'll get a chance to hear your story. So I feel like Shawn is going to join us, which is a perfect time because we want to hear your origin stories, because you're both heroes. And so we're gonna get into that. Let me bring Shawn into the studio. Mr. Shawn Francis, are you there? Delayed.
Yeah, I think I am now. Yeah, it's delayed on my end. How's it looking on your end? How am I being received?
You are freezing, and
I can hear you. It's pink. Wow,
it's delayed.
Yeah, it's delayed. I'm not sure what the problem is.
All right.
We can hear you, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, well, that'll be great for our audio, but it'll look really raggedy for the YouTube and stuff. I don't know what
it's going to look like a regular Zoom call where somebody's got their profile picture up there. And since you're not moving, Shawn, actually for some of us it's going to look just like normal, but there you are. Now you're moving.
Okay.
All right, good.
Now it's all caught up. Yeah. Okay.
There you go. Okay, I think we're there. So we're just at the point, Shawn, where I'm just asking Sara and Natally to share their origins, where they started, how they, really from the very beginning to how then they eventually, obviously, married and had children of their own, and then met and put the Willowcrest School together. So I'm not sure which of you would like to go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I was thinking this morning of the show and of you guys, and one of the things I started when I thought about when I not got into financial services, but began to build a bridge between the services and our special needs community. I started thinking, if I had everything come true in terms of my desire to serve our community, what would I want to do? Like, if I didn't have to worry about money, what would I want to do? I thought about gated communities where you had like your own school district and all this kind of stuff. And then I thought of the idea of a school as well. But I thought, like, how do you start a school? So, like, Brian may have said before I got on, you guys may or may not see yourselves as heroes, but we do. And all heroes have an origin. And, so you go ahead and start with that and tell us how you get to that path, because I know some of it is if you want to do it bad enough, you find a way, but I'm still just appreciative and baffled at the idea of launching a school.
Yeah, that's really fair. I think, I thought you were going to start, but I'll just jump in and say I came from an entrepreneurial background. So I think the way that I ever started anything was not looking into it too much. It was kind of like, oh, yeah, it's like four walls and some things and a few people, and I can kind of do that. And then the more you do it, it's kind of hard but then you sort of get through it. I used to open up restaurants. I did that when I was a lot younger. So it was the same sort of thing. There's all these like massive hurdles, but I suppose if you're just looking at the very next thing, that's usually something that you can do. So it's funny because I actually feel that way about my son now. Now this is really jumping way ahead, but
it's okay.
I have a son with autism and he's 8. And I feel most successful when I'm really just approaching him in this moment about, well, what does he need now? What's going to make him successful now? How do I kind of galvanize him in this moment? And then all those other things that are like later, and independence and whatever, all the things that feel hard and scary, they're not even what's happening this moment. So I'll just do this moment. And I think that's how anything is made, actually. Was made.
That's great. And as I'm saying it, asking the question, I was answering it myself. I was relating to, we have an event coming up soon, and did a live yesterday with an estate planning attorney that we're working with. And we use the service that we use for the live portion of the, for the podcast, StreamYard. We did that to go live on Facebook yesterday. And as we're setting it up, she says to me, and then this is a woman who sits down and helps people, like, I get estate plans, special needs trust. This is a lot of responsibility in someone's betterment. But yet she says, wow, so you've done a handful of scary things before, huh? And it got me to thinking of the first time Brian and I used StreamYard or decided to launch the podcast, is like,
Yeah.
you could ask, well, how do you start a podcast?
Totally.
We didn't even really know. So,
Yeah.
and then the other lesson is, as human beings, we complicate, and because I'm like, well, how do you start a school? And like they say, how is not half as important as why, but yet I still feel like I needed to know exactly how you did it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the way Natalie and I met, she called me and was like, so I'm a mom. I have this great idea for a school and I want to bring in really great professionals. And I'm a behavior analyst by trade. And she's like, I heard you, we'd never met. I heard you would be a really great asset. Would you like to help? And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I've had a lot of families try and start schools or programs before, and I've helped in different ways. Sure. Why don't you call me when you're a little further in the process? Like, okay, lady, I'm sure you're going to start a school. And like 2 or 3 months later, she called and it was like July. And she's like, okay, I'm really doing this. I'm hiring teachers. Do you want to come help me hire a teacher? And I was like, sure, that sounds fun. Like, let's check this out. And at the time, we literally had one student. We had her son. And we were going to build a school around, can we say his name?
Henry?
Yeah.
Sure.
Around Henry. I just want to like divulge his information. But we're going to build this school around Henry. And then we had one other student. And in the process, we hired this teacher. And by the time the school opened, Natalie was like, she's not the right person. And we had already let her go. So school's now starting, we like didn't even have a teacher. So we really just put our heads down and like, it just started. And it started because Natalie has this experience in building organizations. And so she had that knowledge that made it work in a way where other parents don't have those skills. And so the school, they're kind of putting it together, but they don't know how to build an organization. And Natalie knows how to do that. So that set it up for success. But also we kind of were just moving along, right? Okay, we have 2 kids. We have our assistant teacher became the teacher and we just started, and it has obviously grown over time.
Yeah, there was a lot of infrastructure. I built the school like it was going to be a serious school. So and I guess what I mean by that is like, there were only 2 kids and my kid was 1, but we had like contracts and we had a syllabus and we had a way of doing things and we had policies and procedures and we had insurance. And so there was this foundation of like something that like functioned in an intelligent way that was set up because we were setting ourselves up for the success that we knew we were going to have. This was going to be something that people needed. And if it didn't feel legitimate, and not just feel legitimate, but if it wasn't truly legitimate, then how could people feel safe to send their kid that needs all the support? Right. And I felt a tremendous amount of responsibility to create something that people could rely on. And
okay, good.
And that the parents could get the support they need and that the kids could get real help, because as all parents of special needs kids know, there's this sort of hysteria and not that it's not correct around early intervention, but there's this idea of like, it's now, make the impact this moment. So we didn't have time to be like, yeah, bring your kids. And in a few years, we'll have this down and we'll know what to do. We needed to know in the moment, and that it had to be that way. So while we actually keep getting better, it was pretty good from like when we hit the ground.
And I think with this idea of early intervention, we should say that Willowcrest is a preschool. Our target audience is kids ages 3 to 6. Okay. And it's really to hit that early intervention piece and make sure that it is comprehensive and make sure that we're all working together as professionals. So we have behavior, speech, OT, music therapy, a special education teacher.
Speech, OT. We had a personal trainer for a while. We kind of dabble and we invite a lot of different specialists to come in and work collaboratively to the benefit of all the students that participate.
That's fantastic. I find that, what is hitting me in this conversation sort of dovetails with where I've been at personally in terms of the desire to serve the community, especially over the last week. So I've mentioned once before, Brian and I work in, financial services, and I've come to just really face that that's one piece of this entire puzzle in terms of just wellness. And a big part of wellness is goal setting, dream chasing, bringing things to fruition. But like anything that affects the general population is 10 times more important to our community. And I've never seen anybody put together a plan as to how to start a school. And so, but I think that's something that we should revisit in details when you started talking about insurance and the various pieces.
Yeah.
I think that's a conversation to have for another time, because we could devote a whole show to that. And that's why I, see us, doing some more work in the future. But let's go ahead and get to each of your beginnings and your childhood. And it's okay if we jump all over the place, because how you deal with a diagnosis and even respond to a dream or a vision or a desire that comes to you has everything to do with how and where you were raised, both physically and metaphorically. So why don't you each tell us about that?
After you.
I grew up in LA, and my mom is actually a speech pathologist. And so she has always worked, a pediatric speech pathologist, has always worked with kids since I was born. My mom had taken some time off, and somebody called her and was like, I have a son. I forget what his language issues were, but I hear that you would be really great at it. I'll come watch your baby and you can see my son. And they are still friends to this day, and watched me while my mom saw her son, and they created this relationship. But it started my mom's private practice. And so I think growing up, I always saw her helping people. I always was around while she was working. She was a working mom. I knew that's all I ever knew. It's all my girls know, is a mom who works. So I started right after college. I went to go work for a behaviorist who had shadows going into schools. I literally 4 days after I graduated college, started working, was hired, and started working the next day. Had no idea what I was doing, but realized I really liked it and went back to school to get my BCBA. And that's a board certified behavior analyst. And over the last 20 years have worked for agencies. And then when I had my own children, started a private practice. And I have 3 girls who are 10, 8, and 3.5. And as my oldest was little, I sort of built my private practice up. And then I've, had bigger practices, smaller practices over the years. And then Natalie called me, and now a big part of my week is spent at Willowcrest. And then on the side, I have a small private practice as well, where I do a lot of parent education and consulting with teachers and schools on how to best support their children.
And Sarah, your children are neurotypical, or do any of them?
My children are neurotypical. My oldest has some learning disabilities, and ADHD runs in our family, and that seems to be running throughout the genes pretty hardcore. So they are pretty mainstream, but also have their own learning differences. And we're addressing that with each of them individually.
As everybody does. I think, as we've gotten a little more sophisticated in diagnosing, a lot of families realizing that all of their children have different ways of learning. There's, different ways that seem to fit certain kinds of personalities, and everybody has challenges. If not, everybody would be, robotic. We'd have uniform learning, right?
Absolutely. And I think, obviously doing what I do, looking at my children when they were little, my oldest, I was like, oh, our local public school is really big. And I was like, this is never going to work for her. I didn't know why. I just knew that she was not going to fit there. And so at that time we found a smaller private school that was going to accommodate her needs. And I think that model also really spoke to me, and that sort of Willowcrest follows in that similar vein of being a little more boutiquey, a little more really personalized, feeling homey.
Got it.
What about you?
Yeah. What about you, Natalie? Share with us.
Also grew up in LA. I kind of hated school. Sort of funny and ironic to me that I ended up in school, but yeah, I have 2 kids. My daughter is 12 and my son is 8. My daughter's neurotypical. And I didn't have any plans to go into education at all. It wasn't until my son was diagnosed really early on. He was diagnosed with autism when he was about 1.5 years. And we have a sweet story, which is just that when my son Henry was born, I mean, we were really just very, very connected from the minute he was born. And we were kind of inseparable. And I love both my kids. But I don't know. I mean, and I'm bonded to both of them, but we had this very special bond. And so his autism was late onset. So he kind of presented pretty neurotypical until he was about 1 year. And then I could see that, certain things were falling off and there was a concern. And at first the pediatrician and several people we spoke to thought that he just couldn't hear, that he had just had a lot of ear infections and there was like a hearing issue. So they're like, just put tubes in his ears and he'll be totally fine. And you'll see in a few weeks, he'll be talking and this will all be nothing. And I was like, okay. And so we did do that. We put tubes in, and after a few days, I don't even know, it might've only been 1 or 2. I was like, there's something else. And I took him and had him evaluated. And it was around that time that I actually met Sarah's mom. But I guess because of the bond that we had, I essentially just threw myself into his life and his therapy. So, we started doing all the things. We did ABA and we did speech and we did OT, and we kind of built that diet of intervention up, but I participated in all of it in kind of this deep way. So a lot of parents will come to a session and they'll sit outside and the kid goes in and the therapist closed the door and there's something else happening on the other side. And usually I was like, hey, coming in there. What are you guys doing? Because I was like,
that's normal to me.
Yeah, this is my, and if he has to do something hard for him, I can tolerate it so long as there's compassion and I can be there for him. And for a long time, I was actually the motivating thing for him. So, I talk about how I would take my kid to this incredible OT clinic in Tarzana and, they'd want him to go up and down the slide. And you'd think he was like going to the dentist, right? Like it was hell.
Yeah.
And I was like, but everything was, he didn't want to do anything, So I was like, we can't live a life where we do nothing. Yeah. So we're going to try it. And maybe we have to try it 20 times. And after 20 times, if you don't want to do it, then we could talk about that. Then maybe you really hate slides. But until we know, I don't know, you don't even know if you like it. So the way I could tolerate doing that to my son was I was like, okay, I'm going to go up too. I'm going to go up the slide. So now I'm up here. So if I'm up here, you have to come too. And now we're both going to go down. And that was the beginning of working on stuff with him. So it just put me in the center of all of that intervention and gave me a really deep understanding of what he needed, what the parents' perspective and experience of that is. It was this amazing sort of, research, or I don't know.
It's fascinating.
Immersive process of
because you realize that a child's education is a combination of the student, the teacher, and the parents in some way, right? Most parents are just hands off in majority of the educational process, but those of us who have children who have some neurodivergent issue, we feel like we almost have to be immersed in the educational process because it's a way for us to maintain the connection and to make sure that we're hitting on the spots that that they're responding to.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. Well, I'll make it real short. This has become like this mantra for me, which I heard on a podcast. I think it was yesterday. And again, anything that affects the general population is twice as important to our community. And it was just about personal development and responsibility. And it was a saying, which is that, there are little boys and little girls that are waiting for someone to come and save them. And as soon as you realize that no one is going to, is when you become an adult. And so nobody's coming to save us, any of us, neurodivergent or otherwise. But for those of us who are parents or caregivers or those with special needs, we really have to accept there was somebody coming to save them, the same person that's going to save us, which is us, ourselves, and nobody else can do that. Yeah. And we can't do that unless we step forth, I don't know, for lack of being corny, into the light or whatever the case might be. And now if you, and this isn't to judge, because there's somebody listening that may be thinking, well, I didn't go into the therapy session. Is that, am I being judged for that? No, but this is something to be said, and it serves you and your child a whole lot better if you build a relationship of trust and an atmosphere of trust to get to the point where when you go to a session, you can be like, oh yeah, they're in good hands, as opposed to not knowing, as you said, Natally, how, how compassionate someone will be, or how much compassionate will be absent, I should say, during any of those sessions. Those things are very important. It's everything, quite frankly.
And I think it depends on the kid too. I think you're
totally.
Not to speak about you, but I think that you're finally at a place where you're like, I know Henry is okay within himself to be able to entrust him with other people in a way where you're a little bit less involved. But it took that time to get there. And so some other families feel that way when their child is much smaller, and because their child presents differently, right? Everyone's so different. So I think that there's that piece. And the other thing that I think that you always speak to is that which plays into Willowcrest, is the idea that parents become the gatekeeper to all of the information, right? They're the ones who take the kid to OT. They're the ones who take the kid to speech. They're the ones who take them to school. So they then take in all of that information and kind of have to relay it to the other people. And one of the things that we really wanted to do with Willowcrest, based on Natally's experience there, is make sure that we were helping to facilitate that amongst the professionals, that the parent didn't, while we want to share that information with them, that they did not have to bear the burden of helping the staff communicate and helping the professionals to make sure they were all on the same page, but that the professionals could all do that on their own, so that parents could just hear the goals and they didn't need to hold on to all that information and be the networker in that sense.
Yeah, we're all our kids' case managers to a certain extent.
For sure.
I actually think that is an important role for the parent to be involved. But yeah, I was like, well, I mean, most of my team, right? My OT, my speech, they knew each other, but they were not connecting about my kid. Not because they don't like each other, but they don't have time. They're all kind of doing their own thing. So I'm running around and I'm like, hey, so-and-so said that when he's going down the slide, maybe you can say, hey, say go, right? And then he said go. And I'm like running around saying all this stuff. Yeah. It was like this, what? It's too much. And again, I had this like really luxurious opportunity to participate in my son's process that most people don't even get to have, right? Sure. I was working. I would have liked to have gone back to work, and I waited. So I was there with him. I could be his witness. And a lot of parents cannot do that. They don't know, they don't get to see it. They don't get to share that information, right? Not even because they don't want to, but because they have other obligations or they have other kids or whatever. So
how old is Henry now, Natally?
Henry's 8.
8.
He's 8. So so we've been at it since he was 1.5. So that's a long time.
And when did you guys start the school? Like, and at what point during this process did you say, I think we need to start our own school?
Yeah. So we started the school in 2021.
We're in our third school year.
That's right. So we tried things. And there was a big feeling of like, it's not good enough,
Mhm.
It's not intelligent enough. It's not holistic enough. It's not immersive enough, all those kinds of feelings.
Yeah. So you're doing several things rather than complaining about what isn't available.
Yeah.
You're being solution oriented and like, well, let's make it available. And maybe that's part of the answer to my question too, which is, oh my gosh, who starts a school? How do you start it? And it might be the answer to the following thing too, which is you're starting a school not that far removed from COVID. What on earth was that like?
Yeah, that was really crazy. I started a micro school for my daughter, neurotypical daughter, when COVID first hit. So I did a school in my backyard for my daughter and a couple of other friends, and I hired a teacher, and I'm like, they're going to go to school in person right here. And so I had already I flirted with that a little bit, this idea of creating a school, creating curriculum, hiring a teacher, not really with my son in mind, actually, at that time. And it was really great, actually. We did extracurricular activities. We had a bunch of kids coming from other schools to do art in our backyard, and so it was really sweet. But yeah, sorry, COVID is your question. I think we actually did amazing with COVID. We did finally have a COVID situation at our school, but for the most part, it was a pretty small group of people, right? We have our maximum capacity at Willowcrest School is 14 kids. But when we first started it was only 8. So, we had at that time probably 6, 7 kids and families. And so it was all pretty manageable and everyone was respectful and so damn grateful to be there in person and get to drop off their kids somewhere. And then we just kind of managed it.
Yeah.
A lot of masking, not masking, following rules. I kept calling Sarah. I'm like, what's the rule? What do we, how many days? What? That was Sarah's.
I'd be like, I don't know. Let me check the county website and let me see what my other kids' schools are publishing. Right. And it was just trying to make the most sense out of it. And I think while the school was built with Henry in mind, it quickly became not about Henry's needs, but about the greater good of the school and making sure. And I think that that's one area that often can be really tricky when you start a school for your one particular child, is focusing only on that child and not what the school looks like. So Shawn, when you ask about building a school, it was built with Henry in mind, but it wasn't built for Henry. It was built for a population.
Yeah.
And so that also helped to make it sustainable, right? Henry doesn't go to Willowcrest anymore.
Yeah.
And the intention was never for him to be there long term.
Sure.
Because that wasn't our population that we were aiming for. So I think that also gave us the ability to really sustain the school and keep growing, is because it was this philosophy that we were building upon and really building a school, not building a place for Henry to be.
Yeah, it was just informed by that experience.
Sure.
Of, our experience. Yeah.
Fascinating. So here's a question I have for you. So I guess it's in some way the education is customized for every child, just like an IEP is generally, right? And there's a blend between traditional classroom type education and the supportive therapies that they need, correct?
Yeah.
I think the question you're asking is what are the goals that we're sort of, maybe I don't know.
How do you manage that? And what are the goals that you set out to and feel like you've accomplished what your IEP or whatever the established standard is, what you set out to do. Yeah. That's where I was going.
So I think
thanks for filling it in.
A big part of that is we knew what kind of kid we wanted to serve, right? So that whole idea of the school was creating this holistic model where we bring in what we knew all of these kids would need. So all the kids that come to our school, they need OT, they need speech, they need some sort of behavior plan. Everyone benefits from music therapy. That was sort of introduced, anyway, all of them get the same services because they're all kids that would benefit from that. So one way that we know you're a Willowcrest kid is because you're oh yeah, that needs to be part of our like therapeutic diet. We want all that, right? If somebody only needs OT or only needs speech, then like we might be too immersive and too much. But all these little kiddos, they usually benefit from all that. And I knew that. And, you know, one of the things we wanted to make sure that didn't happen was that parents would come in and try to cherry pick, like, well, I want speech, but I don't want OT. And I was like, I know that you're going to get the best result if you have the whole package. So it's just tuition for everything. And then we're not like dissecting this into pieces.
That's actually brilliant. I mean, because how else could you do it? That's actually brilliant, right? So it becomes sort of a formulaic therapy and educational process.
And it is that though. So like our speech therapist, she'll come to school, she's doing push in, she's doing pull out, and whatever work she's doing with a kid is like in real time shared with the teacher, because then that teacher is using those speech techniques with that kid in class and in school all week long. So nothing happens in isolation, right? It's not like, my kid does speech therapy 30 minutes or an hour a week, and that has nothing to do with anything else that happens to them all week long. It's, for us, it's all part of the ingredients that make the cake, that supports the kid all week long.
And
let me ask you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We have a meeting
Sarah.
once a week with the teachers and OT and speech and behavior and Natalie, and we all meet usually on Zoom so we can all be together, but where we dissect each kid. And we go into, okay, this kid, what are we really working on with them right now? And what are we really working on from the speech perspective? And, this is coming up in the classroom. How do we tackle that from a sensory perspective? And the OT can participate in that conversation so that we're really making sure to hit all those goals. So if they're not seeing it, we are discussing it, and we're being really intentional about applying those strategies throughout the week, not just in their therapeutic sessions. And I think those meetings have really proven to be the recipe that all of the ingredients are going in, if we're going to use the cake metaphor some more.
Use the cake.
Sure.
I sure will. So it really has helped to solidify what's going to happen throughout the week and make sure that everyone feels like their questions are being answered. It's not a teacher like, well, I don't know what sensory strategies are, and I don't know how to apply them for this kid, but I do know the sensory strategies for this kid because the OT is telling me, and they're telling me because they're working on it in OT. And sometimes OT and speech get to co-treat, and sometimes they're pushing into the classroom. So everyone's really learning from one another.
Yeah, that's another nice part of it. I'll just underscore that, right? So like, it's like a master class for all the therapists and teachers too, right? They're like, I have an education background, and now I know all this stuff about OT and speech I didn't know. And they get to use those tools, right? That becomes part of who they are, what they know, and how they go about creating their own lessons and things. So it's just this big win-win.
Natalie, I want to go back to something you said earlier, because you were talking about the parent that may cherry pick in terms of what services they do or don't want. And, we've all seen that parent that may be somewhat hands off. But I think for the most part, most of the parents, at least that I know, are, no matter how empowered they may feel or otherwise, they are involved to an extent. So I could see the parent that would in fact do that. No. I know exactly what they need. What they need is A, B, or C. And especially if you're not part of a traditional school district and everything, they may think that they have the ability to do that, and they know their child. What do you do in a situation where someone is being enrolled, or there's an IEP, whatever the case might be, and they're very insistent about the things that they think their child may need, and they do in fact want to cherry pick? How do you address that?
Yeah. So I'll say that actually has never come up for us. Most of the parents are happy with what they are going to get. But I'll say this. We had not an IEP, but we had like a parent teacher conference recently. And the occupational therapist sort of like went into all this detail about what she's doing with this one kiddo. And I could see that the parent didn't really know a lot about OT. So I feel like it's our responsibility in cases, if somebody came to me and was like, we don't need OT. That's not going to be meaningful for us. I don't want my kids spending time doing that. I think we have a responsibility to educate and just say like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let me just make sure you understand what it is that you get, right? Like, oh, what is OT? Like, how is that relevant to me? These are the ways that we feel like it could be relevant for your child. And then have that conversation, right? And if we're like, oh, that's totally irrelevant to your child, then let's not do that. I also don't want to waste anybody's time, right?
Yeah.
I even met the kid that wouldn't benefit from, all of that really good stuff. I think the saying "I don't want it" comes from a place of just not knowing enough about benefits.
So there's flexibility and an attempt to go ahead and meet the parent halfway to customize the plan to whether, provided that they're making a well-informed decision. I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that. Yeah. Wow, I love that. That's great. Because I could see the other thing taking place too. So that's why who we are and what we bring to the table is just so important. And the one thing you learn in our community is at the end of the day, people are people. So I'm sure you probably run into it. I've seen people have conversations on social media about the absolute manner in which they believe one should advocate. And this is just someone that's just a parent, not even necessarily a professional in terms of a teacher or offering any services a special needs community. But I've seen parents ostracized by other parents just based on the opinion they have as to here's how you should advocate. Here's what you should do. So for you to have that approach, I think that's fantastic.
And I think for a lot of families, I mean, I can speak as a behavior analyst, there's a lot of pushback against behavior. Yeah. And a lot of families will come and be like, well, we don't want ABA. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. I'm like, just truth be told, I'm a behavior analyst. And they'll like, look at me and I'm like, but I have a lot of experience and it doesn't look cookie cutter. And here, let me tell you how we apply it. And let me tell you why I think it's important. And let's work together to make sure that it suits your child's needs in a way that you feel comfortable and that in a way that's going to help make progress. And so I think that is one area sometimes we get pushback. And sometimes when there are families who are like, oh, we don't think we need that. Then one of the things is, well, then maybe this isn't the right place because maybe your child doesn't need that. And we've had some families say, you're right, we don't think so. And then we see that as our I don't even know what, I can't think of the word, but our responsibility to then help them find something that is going to meet their needs. We have a lot of families who come to us and for one reason or another, either they or we don't think that Willowcrest is the right place for their child, but we do see it as our responsibility to then help provide them different avenues to find a place that is. This is not, it's us against the world. It is us and let us find what else is out in the world.
That's fantastic. And I was thinking of that as you were talking about behaviors. I was thinking of ABA because that's something that people either love or hate. And some people have just a very, very few people. You will find lesser people that will say that wasn't a fit for us or our child, and more people that will say ABA is bad. So
I think that it's coming, ABA has come a really long way, right? It's a pretty new science. If you think about science and in terms of the last like 40 or 50 years really coming out. And in the last 20 that I've been in the industry, it has changed so much. I think about things I used to do 20 years ago and I'm like, I would never do that now. I didn't know. It was what I was being told by a supervisor who was coming in 1 hour a week. And now I know better. And when you know better, you do better. And so I feel pretty confident that I can present ABA in a way to all families, that really all families, I would say probably not all, but in a way that really feels comfortable and where I can stand behind what we're going to do with their child in the most humane, holistic approach. And I think from Willowcrest, I mean, when Natalie was talking about a masterclass for all therapists, I've learned so much I already had a lot of speech from my mom and working closely with speech pathologists, but I've learned so much from everyone in terms of OT that when I'm out there in my private practice suggesting sensory strategies, I have OTs looking at me like, how do you know all of this? But I've really taken it all in and I want to apply it because I think that there's a place and it's really important. So I think that
I love it. I totally agree. And by the way, I think that, it's really an all-inclusive educational, ecosystem that you've created, which is great, because a lot of times when our kiddos end up in a district setting process, it feels like everything's very compartmentalized and one doesn't talk to the other. And the fact that this is a kind of a holistic approach is awesome. In educational settings, we often measure success, we measure, goals, we measure all that stuff. I don't know why I'm all goal oriented today, but I guess my question for you is, so what do you consider and how do you measure, a successful transition? Is it from Willowcrest into the next level of education, whether that's mainstream or again, other supported educational systems, like that your parents and the whole family have a full understanding of what that transition is? Like, what would you say is a measurement of success for you as at the school? A child has gone through your program and they've come out, and that's been a successful adventure.
I love that question. A lot of parents will ask us, like, where do the kids from your school, where do they go next? Sort of as if this is going to be some marker about how successful maybe the program is, and I think we get a lot of different kids and they go a lot of different places. Sure. And it's really a reflection of who that child is and what they're ready for. And my son went off to a non-public school that is still pretty immersive and is for, moderate to severe kids with autism. That was correct for him. We have kids that go off to private school. We have a lot of kids that go into like a special ed public school program. So it varies. And I would say that those were all the right placements for those kids, and that our goal at Willowcrest School is to really prepare the kids and their families for the next step. So just like a preschool program, can your child find their backpack, find their name, stand in line? Can they feel good in their body? Can they sit at a table with other friends? Do they have some basic communication skills, whether that's verbal or AAC or a PEC system? Do the parents know how to get through an IEP? Can they access IHSS? Do they know how to get regional center funds? Do they have some sort of community now? I think there's something like very foundational that we're lying with the kids and with the families so that they can feel supported and a little bit more knowledgeable. And I would say that everybody that left our school felt like that. Like they knew more. That's
what I was getting at.
That their kid was like ready to take the next step.
Right. Whatever it is for them, whatever that next step is.
Yeah, that they have a good goal for what they want their child to get. When families are leaving and we're helping to support them through the process of finding the next location, it's, what is your goal for your child and how do you see it? And I think one huge responsibility that we have to families is painting a really accurate picture of where their child is at, so that when they leave, they can go, okay, I know that this is not going to work for them, or that this is the right thing because I know who my child is. And I think a lot of times we do a disservice not really painting that picture for families. And we have really learned a lot in our last 3 years on how to paint that and how to show progress, right? We don't do a ton of like data collection, but we do show progress on goals. And we do talk to families about what we think is the most important thing. And really for us, a lot of that is like, what are those functional skills? Communication system, being able to wait in a line, being able to sit at a table with peers, all of those sort of daily living skills, going to the bathroom. We want all of our kids to leave being potty trained, right? Because that is a really important skill that's going to take them places in the future and allow them doors to be open for them. So I think we're really looking at those core elements of what's going to help them. Not necessarily, I mean, ABCs 1, 2, 3 is great. And we do work on that. Right. We do introduce that, but it's really a broader understanding of the child and how they're going to be able to function.
Well, I mean,
I was going to add, go ahead.
so few kids, right? So it's all about independence building. If we have a kid who comes and he's already counting, then we're working more academically and that makes sense for them. If we have another kid who's like really not there and actually they just need some basic regulation tools before they can even think about 1, 2, 3 and counting and colors and stuff, then we're working on some of that stuff while they're still being exposed. I mean, we go through a preschool schedule, right? And we have circle time. We all sit down. We all have lunch. We all count. We all sing songs. We're doing that. That is the sort of like the vehicle that we're taking through our day to get through all of these opportunities for social interaction, for communication, for and learning all of these independence building skills.
I think because we're so small also, we can be patient, right? So it's time to clean up after lunch. No one's packing up these kids' lunch boxes because we can wait. And we can teach them how to do it independently. So when they go to the next place, they know how to open their lunchbox, take out their lunch, open the containers. We have the ability. Whereas in a larger setting, sometimes that's hard because you're like, okay, come on, let's go. Let me do this for you.
It's
and
a rush.
It's a lot easier to just do it for them. But we want the kids to have those basic fundamental skills so that when they go somewhere, they can be independent.
What would you guys say is the ratio between then, if you have an idea, between the life skills and the academics that are being taught to kids? Because it sounds, obviously we know some children lean towards one more so than the other. What would you say that ratio is?
I think for our preschool and for our program, they're really worked on concurrently, right? While we're working on the academics at the table, we're working on sitting, being regulated, having social interactions with your peers. So I would sort of say it's like almost 50-50. I think we probably have maybe 60%, maybe it's 60-40, where we have 60% more, less academic and more social immersion interactions, but it's really they're worked on together. There isn't one over the other.
Do you guys find, and maybe preschool is too early to tell because our son is in 12th grade, he's 17, and yet I still find myself on the fence between my natural belief is to feel that anything is possible, and yet I believe in being working in or living in objective reality. If you're not careful, you can be like, my child will fly a plane, and actually he doesn't need a vehicle. My child will jump and fly to the moon himself. Yes, as though he's from Krypton. So you have to be careful. So I'm torn between those two as it relates to what he might do after high school. Do you find yourself in any position to have an idea or inkling as to whether or not a child might go to college? Or do you have an answer to a parent that might ask you, how do you determine, or can you, whether or not my child might have a proclivity to continue their education after 12th grade?
So I think this is something we sort of touched on in the beginning, and Sarah just touched on briefly, but really early on, I felt like it was really important to be kind of like honest in a pretty practical way with families about how we saw things. And part of the reason is because I guess as a mom, I had this interesting opportunity to be on both sides, right? Like all of a sudden I was in the room with all the therapists, but before I had been on the other side. And I'm sure a lot of parents have this experience of like the therapist giving them information, but you're kind of like, just say what you mean. What are you really trying to say? And then not saying the thing, right? Like, is my son going to speak? We don't know. Anything can happen. I'm like, no, don't, just say it. Just say something that is actually going to help me. So we ride that line pretty hard. And we are both, the reality is we can't say definitively anything, right? We don't know what's going to happen. So we try to speak pretty frankly about just what's happening in this moment and what the next step, in our opinion, then might be. Nobody can tell me now whether my 8-year-old is going to go to college. I know that better now than ever because of how immersed I am in all of this. So what we say is, if we're saying to someone, hey, your kid had a great day today, we say what a great day meant wasn't that your non-speaking child spoke all day today and made 13 new friends and like independently did everything. We're like, yeah, your non-speaking child, like they made sounds for several words today, and they only fell on the ground and got upset like 5 times instead of like 15 times, and they only hit once. Like, we're really clear about what good is, right? Because
Right.
as a parent of a child who needs support, if someone's like, it's a good day, I'm like, oh, they don't have autism? Like, there was no autism today? That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Say, yeah, it was good in this way, right? Like, you can feel great about that. Progress was made, but
Mhm.
it's still this. And
We're at. I'm sorry, just gonna
yeah,
say.
sorry. Yeah.
I we say this each week, and the record seems to change, and it's based on perception, not fact. But I think, at least Brian, for me sitting here, I think this is the fastest hour that we've had. And the following may take a little more time because there's 2 of you, but I think especially because there's 2 of you and because who each of you are, I'm really fascinated to hear this. This is the portion of the show where we will ask the following question with the following context. Our ability to change the world is based on our ability or willingness to change ourselves. So if you can, each of you, and as little time as we have, give just one example, just one, of a belief that you once had and believed strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
You go ahead.
Okay. So I think for me, in terms of this space, the thing that I came to was that we, from a behavioral perspective, we used to look at all like stimming and seeking of sensory input as this thing that was socially significant that we needed to change. And I think that now I see it really differently. I think that if a kid needs that level of sensory input, that while it might be distracting to their education, then we need to come up with some other tools and strategies for them so that they can then be present. But that sort of stimming and that getting out of energy is really important for a lot of kids. And to just tell them to stop is not practical, is not reasonable, and is really not caring, and it's not addressing the issues. So I think that's one thing that's really changed for me.
Okay, with our time crunch, I have to ask you this because I'm going through that. I catch myself as you raise your consciousness. When you're really good, you can stop yourself from doing the thing that might be detrimental. When you're on your way, you catch yourself in the middle of it. I catch myself in the middle of it when I tell my son, like right now, some of his stimming doesn't consist of words. And when it's not words, I'll go, words, Elijah, use words. And then I'll catch myself and I go, does he have to use words? And I'd be like, I don't know. I don't want to stop him if it really helps, but I don't want to hinder his communication. How do you know whether the stim is needed or let's make that practical? How do you determine that?
Well, I think, it's a really fine line, right? It's looking at the kid. It's addressing, well, what is the stim doing in the moment? And really looking at it from a behavioral perspective and analyzing that behavior. Are they receiving something because it feels really good when they make the sound? Or is it that they're doing it and then trying to see, is there another way? Could we give him some pecks that might be able to, while he's making the sound, communicate what he wants? I think it's really looking at it from that perspective, and there's no right or wrong, right? Because it's figuring out the why and the function of the behavior, and then figuring out, well, is there another way we could give him that sensory input where he could then also be using his words? Or how do we address that issue and looking at it from that?
Because I was less sensitive to it when he was stimming, when he stims with words. When it's just sounds, I find myself going, okay, wait a minute, am I supposed to, So anyway, Natalie, you go ahead.
I guess I had a lot of different thoughts about this, but I guess the most relevant one recently was that I think as parents, we're always trying to build the A team, and we want that to change as little as possible, right? So you like have that one-to-one, or you have that person, and you're like, I will pay you to never leave. Don't go anywhere, right? You want your people because it feels so supportive. And what I've started to feel is that when I can tolerate the change, there's sort of this, like what I see is this underlying belief in my own son that actually he can tolerate it too. And that the challenge is something that he can sort of like rise to the occasion of, and that there's a lot of value in that. And while it's nice to have an A team, and I'm always building that for him, I don't have to protect him from change and the things that are going to be challenging for him. That's actually his moment to demonstrate what he knows and to be part of the world and a person here, right? It's something that we're all sort of working on.
Excellent.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Beautiful. Well, this has been an amazing hour. We've had some guests where the hour seems fast. This definitely is. And Shawn, you missed at the very beginning. These two are a good time. That's what they said. They were a good time. So an hour goes by fast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you. There's a lot of stuff that we want to promote, but for the sake of the hour, we're probably going to keep it. We have to keep it short. First of all, Natally and I met at a We Are Brave Together event, and sit on the board of We Are Brave Together, and that's a support group for moms, which is so amazing. So We Are Brave Together definitely is it's an amazing organization that if you're not familiar with it, take a look. It's amazing retreats. Also, I know Shawn's got an event coming up. Shawn, you can throw that back up on the screen if you want. An event coming up this Saturday for families in our community to understand estate planning, financial fundamentals, some real estate. It's going to be an amazing event. It's free, so we have it on the screen. It's part of our Someday is Today's series, and so hopefully you'll take advantage of that. And then last but not least, so one of our biggest supporters is Adaptive Footwear, Billy Footwear, based up in Seattle, who I'm going to see next week, by the way. I'm excited to see him. The founder, Billy Price, has a phenomenal story of how he came to become a member of our special needs community and how he took his adversity, the adversity of his situation, and turned it into something that now supports millions of people all over the world. And so that's an amazing story too, Billy Footwear. Last thing we're going to say is that Shawn and I do a support group for men, for dad caregivers, called The Den. We do a Zoom every other Sunday. And so there's our Billy Footwear. If you click on the link for Billy Footwear, by the way, you get 10% off. So I don't want to forget that. But we have another, our program called The Den. The Den is for dads to get together and share those things that are in a safe space, the things that we encounter on a daily basis that we deal with our children, our neurodivergent children, and our kids with special needs, and just being what it's like to be a dad and to be a husband and a brother and a son in this complex world. So join us for the Den. On that, I'm going to say my sign off, and then Shawn, if I've forgotten anything, you can add too. I always say, I always say now more than ever, empathy is required, but especially now with what's happening over in the Middle East and in other parts of the world, and probably in your part of the world too, wherever you are, empathy is such a required component for all of us. You don't know what somebody else's situation is. You don't know what they're going through. You know what they're dealing with. So be empathetic. Don't be judgmental. And if you could just look at the world through the lenses of love, the world's a much beautiful place. So on that's my sign off, and I'm gonna throw it over to you, Shawn, to sign us off, and we'll say goodbye to our guests.
Yeah, just as you said, well, first, Sara and Natally, thank you so much for your time today. And again, questions are more powerful than words. We need to be more childlike, less childish. Curiosity is an underappreciated commodity. And Brian, you mentioned that what's going on in the Middle East. That's the great example, because there's so many opinions that people have. And I think that, unlike almost anything that I've seen in my lifetime, has people that have opinions that are based in the best intentions and little knowledge and a lot of confusion. So we can never ask too many questions so that we make well-informed decisions and serve our intentions best. And so wherever you might be within the sound of our voice, whether you're catching us live or after the fact, and I thank you to our producer, Shawn Hall, based in Hawaii, wherever you are, we love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sara, Natally. Thank you guys. It's great to have you.